Well, there's an interesting sequence where they show an infographic of like Stanley Kubrick, 5 shots a day. Steven Spielberg, 20 shots a day. Steven Gru, and it's like 100 shots in a day. This is the graphic. Like I'm not sure the exact number, but it's just sort of an insane number. And it's another one of those animated, really cute animated graphics.
I love when there's a part in the film and Steve's like, "All right, we got 45 minutes. We got to power through these next 10 shots."
Welcome to the Film Threat Podcast. I am Chris Gore, rolling solo on another episode of the show, but here to talk about one of the best documentaries I have seen this year. Absolutely over the moon, ecstatic about a film, and I want you to write this down, ingrain it in your memory, The Insufferable Groo. You need to see this film because I'm already a fan. First of all, docs is... I love docs. I just think when you go to a film festival, the percentage of great movies you see tend to be in the realm of documentary. But one of my favorite types of docs is a doc that sort of turns its lens on the on indie film itself. And Steven Gru is a Utah-based filmmaker who is... He's an insane creative genius whose passion is infectious, and you'll witness him. First of all, you get a view of the man himself and what he's up against. You actually get glimpses into some of the films he's made, which are hysterical, maybe not intentionally so, but also charming. And then you get to see him make one of his magna opuses, an epic, stretching the limits of what he's capable of. And you actually get a glimpse into his process. And Jack Black is actually in the film. I have, before I introduce our guest, the filmmakers behind The Insufferable Groo, a couple quick things. Hey, read the Film Threat website every day. There's new reviews of indie movies every day, 3 to 5 reviews of indie films. You will never read about these. You're not going to read about these films on EW, okay? Let me just tell you that. You're not going to read about... We will review anything, and if you'd like us to review your movie, just go to filmthreat.com. There's a little button at the very bottom that says Submit. Send us your movie. We'll review it. I don't care. Short film, web series, documentary, short doc, animated doc. Are there animated docs? I have no idea. I've never seen an animated documentary. I've seen documentaries about animation. But submit and send us your film. Also, follow us on social media. We're Film Threat on everything. The Instagram, the Tumblr, the Twitter. And of course, if you'd like to support the show, go to patreon.com/filmthreat or just look us up on Patreon and you can get the full collection of Film Threat magazines from the 90s. We scanned them all. I was involved in this project personally. This was not fun. This was insufferable. But I have our guests in studio, the director of The Insufferable Groo and the producer. The director is Scott Christopherson and Jared Harris, producer. And I can't tell you how excited I am to have you guys here. Like I said, we were saying just before I press the record button, I see a lot of documentaries. I see a lot of films. I watched this film 3 times. I had to sit down and watch it. I'm thinking it can't be as awesome and fun as the experience that I just had. And each time it got better and better because, you know, when you've seen a movie you really like and you're seeing it with someone who hasn't seen it, you're kind of re-experiencing it. I just got to tell you, my first question off the bat is, where did you find Steven Gru?
Well, those are some glowing remarks, so thanks first off. But where we found Steve was a student at BYU where we were both undergrads there, but he was much older than us, 7-8 years, and he was kind of a legend at BYU. Like a lot of people knew about his films, and right. He was in the same class with Jared Hess. Right. So they were classmates.
Jared Hess, the director of Napoleon Dynamite, Nacho Libre, Gentlemen Broncos. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Jared Hess. So that's cool.
Jared's a comedic genius for sure. So I had never met Steve Gru though. I just like had seen some of his films, and then my buddy, our other producer, was acting in one of his films, and I saw it on Facebook. Like this was 10 years after I'd graduated, and I'm like, holy crap, this guy's amazing. You know, we've got to do something with him. So I said, set up a lunch. I want to meet him, and we went out to lunch, and I said, Steve, we're interested in following you as you make your next movie, whatever that is.
Right.
And if you can get one of your A-list fans, let's do it. And
first of all, so you did you were already like a fan, and you had seen his movies, right? Like, or you became a fan. Because it's hard to, when it's a fan of a film, this is along the lines of Steven Gru is incredibly prolific. I mean, you point out in the film he's made like 100 movies, couple hundred movies and counting. I'm sure he's made more since before the podcast is over. There'll be a couple more that got made. It's just it's insane. But these are not great. See, it depends. I don't like this sort of qualifier of great, best, whatever. It's like he had a vision for a type of film that he was making, and he accomplished the vision, and the results are for other people to determine. I feel like if you're entertained, that's probably the most important factor.
Are you not entertained? Yeah, I mean, right? Like that's
when you look at like the sort of montage at the beginning, and he does this video where he gives acting lessons. First of all, I don't know what gave him the gumption, and I just want to use the word gumption. You don't get to use the word gumption too often, so I'm using it. I'm bringing gumption back. To think that he could, relay advice on acting, and it's used throughout the film as kind of a bracketing device. There are these lessons. First of all, I thought that there are so many. When you look at when I see a lot of doc films that are almost there, I'm like, almost there. I feel like you guys really used your assets perfectly. I mean, it is a perfect note where you used all these assets in the correct way, in the way that just led you along the story, that added so many layers to it. And as much as others in the film have issues with Steven Gru, thus the title, The Insufferable Groo, you really begin to like him by the end. So where did this acting video come from?
You want me to answer that?
That was actually a school project. So he made it in school, right? He made it in school, and he was actually following some sort of. This is something that he'll push back on. Actually, when someone asks about it, he's like, "Oh, those aren't my opinions, on how to." Which I think it's a mix of that. So he used like a resource or something like that he had found on acting tips. And made that video, so embellished, and added to, and kind of used this text that he found as a base, and.
But the gumption comes from he published it, right? Right, and it wasn't just I'm going to do this. I mean, he took that. It has kind of this Microsoft Word like backdrop, this kind of forum backdrop, and then Steve, says like, this is how you act, this is how you, this is how you perform, this is how you direct, even, and. For us, it was like a gold nugget we found, right? And not only that, we kind of used it in like a jujitsu like way where we turned it not against Steve, but used it like to see his character develop. He talks about character development, right? Mm-hmm. And you see him develop in the movie as he's talking about character development from 2004. And he's got a sweet, old school haircut, like mullet-like, and a nice button-down shirt that's open halfway. I love that acting workshop. I mean, he would like it to be more updated, and I think he actually did update it, today. And when we found it, we're like, yeah, this is kind of the perfect chapter breakup for the movie.
It works so well. The other thing that works great about the doc, you've got so many layers. You've got that as sort of a device to move things along and sort of set sections. But then also you've got the struggles of getting this film made. And then also these, I thought was such a great choice on your part was to these animations. The little animations that come in really add to it. It's a kind of thing where like you're making a doc like, oh, we don't have money for that. We're not going to put it. It's used so well in the sense of like Stephen at one point is sort of describing his dreams and whatnot, and then you see it come to life in the form of an animation. I mean, and that happens a bunch of times when certain characters are introduced, like Jack Black or Jared Hess is actually in the movie as well. Talking about how Steven Gru inspired him. Those animations were awesome. So, where did that idea come from? How did you guys like source that? And then I don't know. I happen to love that. It's sort of, when do you use it's not an infographic per se, although there are some infographic aspects of it.
It was my idea, I think.
It was right. It was actually my wife's idea to say, hey, let's do animation. And we didn't really have the money for it, but that's when you get your students to do it. So I hired one of my students. I mean, I'm a professor of film, and we paid him pretty well, I thought, for like a student rate. Mm-hmm. But I remember us talking about it, and those animations were always kind of like, let's get inside Gru's head as best we can, or like these are maybe visual representations of what's going on in his head, you know, because he's a tough nut to crack, right?
Yeah.
And also, I mean, I think other times we just had a little bit of fun. I mean, you can't really coach what David Heath did. He's our animator, where, you know, at one point there's a monster who is trolling Gru, and his nipples turn into hands that then type the comments, right? Like, that was all the animator. That wasn't my idea or Jared's idea. Like, I love that stuff.
Oh my God. It's just a great, so you yourself, you're a film professor.
Right, right.
Yeah. At BYU or where? Like,
yeah, now at BYU. So I used to teach in Austin, Texas at like a really small liberal arts university for 3 years, teaching film. And then, yeah, that's my alma mater. And they had a job opening, and now I teach there. I've been there for like almost 4 years.
Wow. So that's a great new way of doing it, is to get your students to do it at a student rate. Look, I think it's smart. Look, you got to look as doc filmmakers. I've said this many times on the show. You're doing community service, right? You're not rich. There's not a limo didn't drop you off. I feel like you guys drove a rental here.
We took bird scooters all the way from LA.
Did you really? Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Those annoying scooters.
Yeah.
Something is going to happen with those. I feel like some horrible accident is going to occur.
They're going to come alive, and
yeah. ERs have already risen.
Someone did die on one in DC.
Really?
I did read that a few weeks ago.
Yeah, you're right. We're not really making money.
Yes. Yeah. Documentaries, even though the premiere is actually tonight. The premiere's tonight. Jack Black is actually attending the premiere. But yeah, the life of a doc filmmaker, you're doing this out of love, passion, interest in the subject, and just, I just don't, I mean, I don't need to tell you, you're working as a film professor, and you made a movie on the side. You're not retiring on this. But anyways, I'm sorry, I got sidetracked. Back to like, so you what kind of convincing did it take and trust did it take to get Steven Gru to sign up for this?
Yeah, that was definitely a process. You know, I mean, Steve, actually, several people before us have tried to make documentaries about it. In fact, it's interesting, like, as we've been promoting the film and going around, you know, I've had friends from school, because, you know, like Scott and I both went to film school at BYU, and people have reached out and said, oh, you know, I always wanted to make this documentary. And so people actually went through the process of filming with him and spending time with him, and we actually used some of that footage in the documentary. And I think actually that he's gotten enough attention that he was wary of, you know, someone making a documentary about him.
Right.
Because they all gave up.
Yeah.
And he's like, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Like, prove it, essentially, you know. And I think Steve's likes the idea of, someone, I guess, promoting him and sharing what he's doing to a certain degree, especially if it's on his terms.
Right.
And that was probably the big conversation that we had to have with him is, look, we're very serious about making this film about you, but it can't, we have to follow you around and show everything. We don't want it to just be a behind the scenes thing on set of this is how you are and this is how you make movies. We want it to be about your life. We want it to be about you. And that is probably the biggest part that took some convincing, with meeting. Scott met with both him and his wife and then even after that, even after he, agreed hesitantly, there was definitely a process of growing trust, probably took about 6 months of, filming, on and off to get him to, and I don't know if we ever really got him to completely open up, I'm still fascinated myself, even after going through this whole process of who the real Steven Gru is, but definitely layers peeled off through the process.
Who knows really what's going on inside that head, that beautiful head of his. But yeah, his wife was very hesitant. I mean, his kids kind of go along for the ride and they love what he does. But we had to say, look, we don't want just the positive parts of your life. We want to know about the difficulties, right? And so there's a lot of parts of this movie that they hate, that they can't stand, right? Like for instance, we put her income in the film to kind of show they're well below the poverty line, right? And they just kind of cringe when we put up that salary of $1,000 per month, and that's what the whole family of 6 lives on, right? And that was hard just for her to, I think, to open up to us. I mean, there's a scene in the film where she's their house floods, right? And she tells us, we walk downstairs and she tells us to stop filming, and we did, and we ended up kind of cleaning up the sewage for 4 hours because we had a shop vac. And that was kind of a big moment for us as doc filmmakers in gaining their trust. She was like, oh, I like these guys.
You're willing to stand in their shit. Literally.
Literally and metaphorically, right. Right.
Yeah. And I'm not making a joke here, but it could be. There are grueling moments, so to speak, in the film. I mean, that being, I think, one of the worst. You see, as he's making this film, and he really, you can see, sincerely wants to make the best. I mean, I haven't seen the film that is, you see the making of. What's the name of it again?
The Unexpected Race.
The Unexpected Race. Yes, an odd title, but it's I mean, I would expect nothing less. The Unexpected Race. Okay.
Yeah.
But he's so assured and he's so confident, and that's attractive. But
yeah, that's amazing, that stuff. The confidence.
Anyway. Yeah, that crazy confidence. Whereas I second guess myself constantly. I mean, I do, I'm sure, and but there's something about a person, he's just so committed to what this epic, it's beyond, I think, his capabilities, but that's not going to stop him, I mean, and also there's some fairly impressive, you ended up using some of the footage from The Unexpected Race in the film near the end. They have this little screening, and some of it is really impressive because we saw those scenes being shot, and then to see the result, it's oh, this is not terrible like we've been led to believe, because having seen his previous work, you would not have it was very unexpected, I'm just gonna say.
What to expect when unexpecting a race is what we originally wanted to call it.
What a weird
the quality definitely was taken up a notch, and I mean, like he mentions in the film, it's the first time he ever shoots on 4K, which he doesn't talk about in the film, that he actually has said since that I don't know if I totally believe this, but he says he won't ever do that again because it takes a long time to download media and to reset. And it's with a bigger camera, it also just requires a little more setup and time and things like that, which he's definitely not used to, most of the time he just shoots on his little personal Canon prosumer camera. And
yeah, I mean, it's interesting how you talk about the production quality is higher. Like, you don't expect that to come out, right?
For sure.
At the same time, when you see that film, it is like his stamp is all over it, like with the writing and the dialogue. Like, though the production quality is higher, the shooting, like the wigs are still 13 years old. Like, it's the original wig from the original Unexpected Race, which he had shot in 2004. So this is like remaking it, right? And so he'll pay attention to like some elements he'll like pay really close attention to, and then some he'll just be like, what the hell?
Like the wigs. Because the wigs, like, it's so weird. Like, all this stuff looks great, and then you see this wig, and it's like a Halloween store-bought wig. It's not...
He would probably disagree with you there.
Right.
This talks about Steve, too. I mean, there's a scene in the movie where he gets a new wig for himself that's, he plays a side character in the film, but then the main character has, the wig that was used before from...
But it's almost like this crown. It's almost like this, maybe in that instance, because like he's bringing back the old Lythorian character. That's the name of the head elf, the main elf that's falling in love with a human. He's the last of the elf race, right? And I don't know. I think maybe Steve sees that wig as like, here, now you can wear now the torch is passed to you, new person I just cast, right? I don't know. I mean, there's other details that he just doesn't have time for now, with little money, and he wears all the hats. Like, he's producer, director, and craft services. And
assistant. He's the AD, yelling at everyone to get... Yeah, he's doing definitely 9 jobs while he's making the movie and being in the movie.
Yeah. Yeah, he has... Yeah, he definitely does everything himself. I had the unique experience of having a little bit of a producer role. I mean, I'm introduced in the film as a producer that helps him with his film, but truth told, he does pretty much everything himself. And like I like that you mentioned first AD, because we did have a first AD on set, but they don't necessarily know every single thing. Like, they didn't plan the schedules. That's all inside of Steve's head, and he tells us what to do. And so it's really, he's in charge, and then he has assistants, and we just do what he tells us to do.
Right. It's tell me about the relationship with Steven and the cinematographer. She struggled to work with Steven, and I really felt for her in one scene in particular. And I think that her storyline, the thread following her is, it's one of the best parts of the doc to me.
Yeah.
Can you talk about her?
I just want to say, like, to me, this is one reason I really like this film, is I feel like it, in an unconventional way, explores these important dynamics in film that I think happen in almost every film that's made, but you don't necessarily get to see them in this way or in these type of extremes, because the director is generally in charge, of the creative vision, and then the cinematographer, is supposed to kind of fit in with that, but still collaborate. And Lauren is just so earnest, she's just this, she's a student, but even outside of that, she's, kind of has like a similar passion to Steven, she's passionate about what she does. And yet they're still, just on complete opposite sides of the spectrum as far as like what their values are, and in film, within filmmaking, and they just, they butt heads. And I think that's probably hard for almost anybody that in trying to find a cinematographer. You don't see this in the film, but in trying to find a cinematographer, we actually reached out to a couple people that Steve had worked with before, and they had a hard time too working with his speed, working at how fast, when you're in charge of the quality of the image that ultimately gets on screen, you want to spend the time to make sure that it's, looks great. And Steve doesn't always allow the room for that.
Well, there's an interesting sequence where they show an infographic of like Stanley Kubrick, 5 shots a day. Steven Spielberg, 20 shots a day. Steven Gru. And it's like, 100 shots in a day. This is the graphic. Like I'm not sure the exact number, but it's just sort of an insane number. And it's another one of those animated, really cute animated graphics.
I love when there's a part in the film and Steve's like, all right, we got 45 minutes. We got to power through these next 10 shots. That's 4.5 minutes per shot.
Right.
Like
You're doing oneers.
Yeah. And it's funny because he even says this in the film, but maybe not as explicitly, but I remember him talking about how it's actually important to him to not do one-shot wonders, as he calls them. Mm-hmm. Like he wants to have them do it a couple times, but so often he is required to, I think he starts off with that intent of, okay, we're going to do this take a couple times and get it just right. But then he runs out of time, and he's just has to start moving fast.
Yeah. Well, to see Lauren in, oh my God, that really dramatic scene where he's having a conversation with him on the phone. I mean, and also to be fair to Steven, these kind of conflicts happen on huge movies, right? So I don't think it's fair to just characterize Steven as like, he's a guy who's difficult. He's a guy who has a vision, and there will, invariably be conflicts with different department heads, so to speak. Not that there are many department heads on a Steven Gru production, but there is conflict. I think that results in, I feel like in my experience, it's the sets where everyone gets along and everyone has the best experience ever ends up resulting in the worst film you've ever seen. Like, this was great. Everything's compromised. There's no central vision. It's just, you must have had a great time making this movie I don't care about. And yet, no, but for real,
yeah. Well, and that's kind of what I mean about, like, I love examining the role of the director, because I feel like in society it's generally accepted that tension and a diva director that is uncompromising at all costs is generally accepted, or any artist, like it's okay for them to be an asshole, if they accomplish something great, if they can create something beautiful, not necessarily that they're harming people, of course, but they can be difficult and ask great things of people if they're achieving something great. And, but where is the line? Like Steve in his mind is doing something great, and it's really important to him, and honestly, it's important to a lot of people surrounding him too. I mean, like, people have a lot of fun on his movies, and you see some of the cast of characters that are involved in his films that are very loyal to him, that work with him time after time. And he has this crew of people that's recycled over, 20 years. People work with him for, 5-year chunks or whatever, where that's their weekend plans is, let's go make a movie with Steve,
Well, it's interesting. And just to be clear, a lot of a-hole behavior is looked past in this industry, for sure. And I kind of feel like when you say great, by great movie, you mean movie that makes money, because I'm not sure that there's a correlation. There's sometimes correlation between great movie, also movie that made money. But I would say that more often the great films are not the films that make money. Sometimes initially they're the films that stand the test of time, for sure. But in any case, so with Steven in this, what were some of there has to be stuff that you guys had to cut, obviously. To make a good doc, you gotta, any doc filmmaker that I know will tell you need 100 hours of footage minimum to make a doc. From that, right? You cutting a doc from 100 hours. So what stuff got cut? Is there anything on the deleted scenes on the DVD? Just to, cause I'm a nerd about that stuff and I actually really like that stuff.
There's a bunch of stuff. We were just talking about Lauren, the cinematographer. She actually, this isn't on the deleted scenes, but stuff that was on the cutting room floor was like she quit twice. There was more than once, and we cut one of those scenes, and you kind of see the more intense confrontation between the two of them. But deleted scenes, we had like film theoreticians on there, kind of like analyzing and picking apart Steve's work and saying like, this is how he fits into like, in comparison to Fellini or whoever, right? Like, how is he an auteur? Like we had someone who was a professional at auteur theory and kind of had her analyze. It was a colleague of mine who's now retired, and that's what she did for a living, was talk about film theory and auteur theory. That's in the extras. What else is in there?
Well, one of my favorite deleted scenes is you see this reference in the film where he has several careers that he tries out, and his most recent is that of an EMT. And he has this job where once or twice a year, he actually there's a clip of this, but we don't explain it. He puts on these demonstrations, I guess. It's like a test, like a real life test, where the EMT students like show up to this disaster that's just happened or whatever, where, some massive car accident or chemical spill, or I don't know what it is, where people are injured, and it just didn't quite make it in, but it's in the extra features where, right?
He really combines like this mass casualty training where Steve puts a lot of pressure on all of the EMTs, and then he takes all of his film training and like puts blood and gore over all of these subjects, and then tells them what they're suffering from. Like, you have a broken leg.
He directs them. I mean, he's creating a scene. He's directing him, and he's like, there's this great moment where he's like, the world is shaking. The world is shaking. He's like telling them what's happening around them.
Oh, it was an earthquake, right?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It just looks like he's a real EMT in there.
So I mean, I love that part because, it shows how that he applies these film skills right in other aspects of his life.
Oh, there's other stars, I guess you could say, in his film that were in our documentary as well. Like John Heder is in his film, and
nice.
John
who plays Napoleon Dynamite.
Yeah. And he actually had some really cool stuff to say about Groo, but it kind of was too tangential from Jack Black. It's like, why all of a sudden is John Heder in this film? Like, we would have had to do like 2 Jack Black ideas, or like 2 movie star ideas, And then, there's other people from like the Neon Trees are in there, and Elaine Bradley, the drummer, plays the nurse in his film, who has to break it to the girl that her mother dies, and she's really funny and kind of performs for the camera. There's other little stuff like that. And also Steve had never screened any of his films at a festival. I mean, he's had public screenings, but never at like a film festival in his 20-year career. He like kind of thinks they're stupid, and I think that I don't know if he thinks.
Well, he's in Utah. It's funny because Slam Dance and Sundance are there, along with whatever dance. There's always some, upstart festival that adds the word dance to a word, and it's really just something to promote. There was lap dance one year, I think.
X dance.
X dance. Yeah. There's always a dance thing. There was Slum Dance. They've done them.
Scott Dance. Scott, didn't you start a little
Scott
festival?
Dance.
I should have. Well, I think he like tries to protect himself by saying, "Oh, I don't care about festivals," but that's because they're so difficult to get into. But he, for the first time, he submitted his film to the Sydney Underground Film Festival, and they kind of asked us for our screener, and they asked us to screen our doc. So they screened our doc and his film in Sydney, Australia, right?
That's a perfect pairing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a natural fit, right? Like, people who see the doc are like, oh, I got to see his movie. I want to see it, right? I don't know if you felt that way.
I did. I wanted, I mean, like white wine and fish. It would be a great combo. Like, I would just, no, I really want to see, I mean, you could go down a rabbit hole of looking at stuff on YouTube, right? Like, but I mean, there's got to be a place. I mean, I'm sure you can buy Steven's movies, right? Like,
just recently, I mean, for a long time, his website actually went down, before we started filming. So for the majority of while we were filming, you couldn't see his films anywhere. But just the last year or so, he's been re-uploading things to YouTube, and then also on Amazon and Vimeo. So you can see,
pay-per-view, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of like shorter clips on YouTube, but yeah, on Vimeo and Amazon, you can watch his feature-length projects. which you can't watch on YouTube. And on Amazon Prime, there's a couple that you don't have to pay for.
Any recommendations based on you've seen much of his work?
I mean, the one that I love that we show several clips from is Challenge of Faith. About kind of like him and his wife having a financial hardship, and then he makes a deal with the devil to become rich, essentially, is a good one.
Circle of Fire, which sounds a lot like Lord of the Rings, and I would be lying if I didn't say you saw a lot of similar threads to Lord of the Rings. I always forget the one with the blue elves, with the night elves. Do you remember the name of that one? Chiquito, maybe.
Well, one thing I was curious about is he uses a lot of intellectual property that isn't his. Like, there's a Joker, there's the Joker show. Batman is in it. Then he's got other things where he's got She-Hulk and a guy. He makes a Hulk movie, right? I mean, he makes a Hulk movie. A guy.
No, that's that clip is from She-Hulk.
It's from She-Hulk. Okay.
Yeah.
So Bruce Banner is in it. So he's aware that none of these things. I mean, but people make fan films, right? I mean, that's perfectly fair. But
that is an interesting thing to note. Is he, as far as getting inside of Steve's head and his understanding, like, yes, they are fan films, and that's a lot of his more recent work. I feel like he's been doing a lot of that lately, a lot of Star Wars stuff too. But definitely She-Hulk, like, that was a pitch trailer. I mean, that's most of his work is pitch trailers. That's how he sees it. Oh, I'm going to make this 7-minute trailer, that kind of shows the scope of the film and develops the story more than a normal trailer would. It's like watching a short film, lots of montages, and then the hope is to get it bought. So he definitely made like She-Hulk specifically, with the hopes that
someone would pick it up.
That Marvel's going to reach out to him and say, oh, we saw this great thing of She-Hulk that you did.
I mean, they've made so many unwatchable Fantastic Four movies. If Fox wanted to hold on to the rights, I think part of their deal with Disney, if they don't end up buying them, and that deal doesn't go through, Fox could hire Steven Gru to make a reboot of the Fantastic Four. And I think that would be, I would pay to see that for sure. I would need that in my collection. I mean, I feel like they've had so many attempts to bring that story to life, the Fantastic Four. Why don't they just get Stephen Groo to do it? They could give him a couple $100 and have him go out and do it. But I'd also like to see something like, when you look at, like, and this is not a crazy thought, maybe it is a crazy thought, you tell me if I'm crazy. When you look at like someone like a James Gunn or some filmmakers, I mean, he came from doing a trauma film, right? He did Tromeo and Juliet. And made sort of exploitation horror films, always something with a heart. There was Super, which I think was sort of had trauma aspects, but also had, I feel like if you gave Steven Gru the money and you gave him and surrounded him with people in the departments that really knew what they were doing, I actually think he would make something incredible.
Well, you're in good company. I mean, Jared Hess thinks the exact same thing. He thinks that he could thrive in like a studio system. Like if Steve was given money, given a ton of money, and didn't write the script, but was given a script and then could just concentrate on directing, and that's it. Not all the other things, that he could really produce something, akin to maybe what other people in the studio system do, because he's very organized.
Well, that's what I think, when you look at like, what's funny is a lot of the big budget genre pictures are people who came from low budget indie movies. Even Christopher Nolan started with a black and white 16 millimeter feature.
Yeah.
He shot on weekends following, and then, which was at Slamdance, oddly enough, in Park City, Utah. And then the next year came back to Sundance with Memento, and then is making a Batman movie, 3 of them for Warner Brothers. I mean, but see, I love that. I love or a James Gunn doing Guardians of the Galaxy and his contributions to the Marvel Universe, and just taking a creative visionary who's kind of off in the best way that anyone creative would be, right?
Yeah.
Because their life priorities are different. and then just giving them the tools and then nurturing that. I feel like Marvel has a history of that. I mean, who would have thought Taika Waititi, this New Zealand filmmaker, let's bring him in to do Thor, because why not, right? Like,
Yeah.
I freaking love his movies.
I
dude.
love his
Yeah.
movies. I love his talks on YouTube. Whenever I see like Taika Waititi, a TED Talk or some round table or Q&A with him, you can go down a Taika Waititi rabbit hole on YouTube.
Well, and his character is the best character
In Thor.
in Thor.
Right,
Hands down, yeah.
and I hear he's back in Infinity War Part 2, whatever they end up calling it.
Okay.
But see, Steve, but I feel like he has that. He really does. He's just never. He's using. It's like this whole like homemade filmmaking. Like, I'm going to take paper clips. I'm going to solve the problem with whatever resources I have in front of me. He's the MacGyver of low budget indie filmmaking.
Yeah, to me, the thing that I keep going back to anytime someone questions his ability is that I think the hardest thing about directing is visually telling a story, and keeping that all in your head, keeping a whole film in your head, like these are the shots, this is how it's coming together. And that's something that Steve is great at. He sees the whole film inside of his head. He storyboards beforehand. A lot of filmmakers don't do that. And he's able to contain all that information in his head. And the only reason he's able to work so quickly and he's telling people, okay, camera here, I need this type of a shot, right? Like that's the most important part of a film, is even being able to string a sequence of shots together, in a logistic way. And I think, what you guys have said is exactly right. If he had more time, namely, which comes from money, and then just the resources to have people focus on those elements that you lose almost immediately as soon as you don't have $1 million.
Well, it's a matter of, can he cross over to a level of professionalism where he could work with, say, a Disney or a Lionsgate or some studio that would give him a shot to, say, make a movie for $1 million. Because oh my God, I just saw this completely innocuous, forgettable suspense thriller with Anna Kendrick called A Simple Favor, right?
Yeah.
It's okay. I would, I don't know why I watched it. I like her. I like the cast. Blake
I did the same thing.
Yeah, I was like, all right, you're on a flight, whatever. You watch A Simple Favor. Steven Gru's A Simple Favor is something that would be, you know what I'm saying?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, but that's
you
part
see
of
what I mean?
but that's
Like-
part of the dilemma here is, well, if you throw them into a studio system, will they still maintain their charm, kind of their heart, their soul, right? What's great about a lot of his movies, maybe part of it is the production quality. I don't know. I mean, I think that's what's great about Steve is he puts his heart and soul into those films, and his writing is so strange. It's so weird that once you put him in a studio system, though, then that writing is gone, right? That other dimension. But also, like with Taika Waititi, that was the first Avengers movie, and I've seen, all of them that I really enjoyed because he kind of like puts his brand of humor in there,
right?
That none of those films have. And even I forget the Hemsworth brother or whichever.
Chris Hemsworth.
Chris Hemsworth, the lead. Even he is like funny. Like he's funnier
Right.
in that film. I mean, he kind of is in Ghostbusters, the new with all the
Right.
female leads. So I'm torn a bit by that, but I mean, I also want to see Steve succeed, and I know that's what that's his dream in life, is to like make one of those films, right? Like be in that studio system.
Jared Hess, if you're listening to this podcast, which I know you are, because I'm a big fan of Jared Hess and his work. He did me the favor of writing some stuff for my Ultimate Film Festival Survival Guide book. So thank you for that, Jared. But you need to write a script for Steven Gru to direct with a big budget and then see what he does with it. Because I think that you could take something that's innocuous, just a completely vanilla suspense thriller, drama, whatever, million or a couple $1 million. You throw Steven Gru in the mix, and I think you've got something special if you allow him to have those Gru moments, like something that he could only do, and allow him sort of a level of creative freedom that he can pop out. I really believe that. I really believe. Another thing that's an interesting thread in the movie, Steven likes to dance. He likes to dance, and you didn't. I mean, like, there's things that I really have to compliment you guys on the choices you made of things to, because I'm hearing things that were cut out of the film, which seem like important things, but you kept him dancing, this sort of euphoria. It was a couple parts when they're driving to Los Angeles to shoot those scenes, and he dances sort of at the state line, and then also dancing after they've shot the scenes with Jack Black at this sort of crazy typical Hollywood club. I love that those moments are there. Like, thank you for not like that. Like, that stuff I think that would be like, oh, you don't need this. You don't need this. No, it displays character.
Yeah, like before this film, we made a film on the militarization of police, kind of like, and it won Best Doc at South by Southwest. But, it's a typical social agenda, not agenda, but like social justice film, right?
Right.
And like this was a definite purposeful leap away from that. Like we wanted to have fun, and we wanted the audience to have fun, to laugh, to enjoy it, right? And I think part of that, including the dancing, like that's us, I think, as filmmakers, also like letting the film breathe, or letting the audience have fun, and letting Steve kind of be who he is. I don't know if you have anything else to add to that, but that's kind of how I feel. Like we love that it's more of a comedy doc than it is, social justice, which so many of docs are today, well, and they have their place.
No,
right.
I love those docs. Yeah. I love wait, what was your film?
It's called Peace Officer.
Peace Officer.
One grand jury doc in 2015 at South by.
Wow. Yeah, I have not seen that. I haven't seen it, and where can I see it? I'm sure it's on.
You can see it on Hulu. I think if you have a Hulu subscription, I think it's still on there.
I don't have a Hulu subscription. Can I use your Hulu subscription?
iTunes, you can still buy it on or rent it on iTunes.
But I mean, it's sort of like, what are you in the mood for, right? Are we going to Jack in the Box or Carl's Jr., or are we going, to Fleming's to have a steak, right? Like, it's different moods. And I think all types of documentaries like that, the comedy docs, the sort of, there's a doc that I just got, which I'm dying to see, that's just about funny. It's called Funny Tweets. And it's just about funny tweets. Okay, that one is fun. But your social issue docs, or something like a Minding the Gap, which kind of became one, unbeknownst to Bing Liu. Bing Liu's making a doc kind of like about his friends and skateboarding that ends up becoming a much more serious subject matter. I think seeing where it goes is important. I don't need to tell you this. You've won awards at festivals. Why do you need to listen to me?
Well,
who cares what I'm thinking?
I think even in Minding the Gap, I bet my guess is that Bing Liu probably, he consciously was doing that, like, more so than the audiences believe. I've only emailed once or twice with Bing, and I know Steve James a little bit, but I love that film. I think that's like one of the best films of this year, like because of how he structured it and how it like catches you off guard, right? It's fantastic. Like, it's a really great movie. Yeah. Another
great moment from The Insufferable Groo. One of my favorites, and it's just sort of, I don't want to say it's glossed over, but it's, he talks about sort of under his breath, like firing some people from the film. But then he confesses he's never actually fired anyone from a film. They just leave. And I feel like that is an insight into why he is the way he is, who he is, that I feel there are some abandonment issues there. And him being, I just love the title of the movie. I don't know when you guys came up with it or how you came up with it, and I'd like to hear about that also. But The Insufferable Groo, you'll never forget that title, right? But the fact that he pushes people to the breaking point where they leave him, he doesn't let them, he's not making the choice to let them go.
Yeah. It's kind of the same thing as, I lost my train of thought, but about I mean, you see some insight into that, with his mom and his growing up. And I think one of like the most open parts in the film is when Steve is talking about, being bullying and having a hard, time in school as a young man, and then saying, that kind of hardened him, and strengthened him in some ways, but also made him too strong in some ways. Mm-hmm. And so definitely like he doesn't ever want to, I mean, I think he has a hard time being vulnerable. He'd rather be strong. And if someone wants to make the decision to not work with him, then that's their decision, Yeah,
he puts up a big defensive front, because it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to and it was hard for us to ask him to be vulnerable. And it's easier just to let people walk than it is to try to convince them. I mean, a lot of that happens because he's not paying them anything over this 17 years. Like, they're making a feature-length movie spread out over 16 Saturdays, right? For the love of the game. Mm-hmm. And they're never going to make a penny. I mean, you see his longtime collaborator in the film, who just volunteered his time, and then eventually I think that guy named AJ Parker, I think his family finally said, you got to stop doing this or else, As far as the title goes, the Insufferable Groo, we originally had kind of this working title called The Magic of Groo, and I think Jared and I did not like it, and initially when we applied to Sundance, and Jared Hess is a producer on our film, right? Mm-hmm. We had that title, and I think that title is problematic because it's not necessarily, it's kind of celebrating it too much without like looking at Gru and looking at his films and his filmmaking process with a critical eye, or at least,
objectively.
Yeah, objectively. I mean, though no documentary can ever be objective. And so once we changed the title to The Insufferable Groo, like, we started getting into bigger festivals, Oh,
that's crazy. So you were rejected from Sundance.
Yeah. Like, we thought we'd get in. Like, we thought we had a shot.
I mean, Jared Hess, being an advocate of the film, I mean, he's in it. You'd think being an alumni too, that would mean something. But okay, well, what advice would you give for filmmakers rejected from Sundance?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say you have to be super honest with yourself and not be afraid to re-edit your film. Or for us, we didn't re-edit, we changed the title, which was a pretty dramatic shift in title. But we really like the new title, and we're never satisfied with the original one.
It's interesting. I actually just read an article this morning on IndieWire about essentially the disappointment associated with not getting into Sundance and how competitive it is. 14,000 films get submitted, and
they pay 150. It's a little over. It's almost 100. Almost
like
100.
that.
Yeah. And those aren't all submitted films, right? Either that's the whole slate. A lot of those films aren't necessarily submitted.
Yeah, they're invited from other festivals.
Yeah, probably,
namely Toronto.
Yeah.
So
I think it's interesting, that the kind of the main point of this article was that a lot of these filmmakers that are in Sundance are kind of tracked. They're kind of groomed, that they like had a short, at Sundance or somewhere else, or, there's a lot of different ways that people end up there, but it's hardly ever is it just like a strike of lightning, of this is the first thing that they ever made. That has happened, but I think like for me, the thing that I always hear being told to me, and that I tell someone with less experience than I do, is that it just takes work. Like you just have to make things. And to me, that's like, I mean, that's another, like, tying it back to our film, is that's the thing that Steven Gru is best at, is just producing. Like he's constantly making things. I mean, I've talked to so many people who want to make films that just aren't making them. You know, like, it's always when this happens, then I'm going to make a film, or the script isn't quite right, or, like something's getting in the way. And Steven Gru nothing gets in his way. And that's probably the kind of the heartbreaking part of it is seems like he's following all the rules, seems like, he keeps making things and it's not necessarily getting him anywhere.
I want to give one more bit of unsolicited advice.
Please.
About if you get rejected from Sundance. I think that you need to believe in your film. Like I was kind of the manager of our film festival plans, right? So like Sundance was our first, and then South by Southwest. Like I knew everybody there, submitted there with the same title, and we had won Best Doc there, and so I was like, oh, probably got a pretty good shot because I have all the connections there, right? Mm-hmm. They passed. We changed the title, and then we kept believing in our film, even though like I was crushed when we did not get into those festivals. Like it was devastating to me, to say the least. And once we changed the title, we got into like Sheffield Doc Fest, which is a really legit doc fest that even my first film, Peace Officer, did not get into. Like they get like 2,000 submissions and only take 100 plus features, so it's super competitive there too. Yeah, you just can't give up, and you have to keep apply for those top like 6 to 10 film festivals, and I also found that like sending out sincere emails to like programmers makes a big difference. Anyway,
I would echo that advice. I think that's like the perfect advice, really, just to not give up. I mean, I was also rejected from Sundance with a comedy that I made, my big fat independent movie. It then played South by Southwest and won no awards. I just want to emphasize that. No awards. None. But then went on to play like 40 other festivals, to the point where like we were playing 3 festivals in one weekend. Awesome. And we just sort of divided and conquered, like had some people going to each one, someone to represent the movie. But yeah, you do have to believe in it. And the sort of final path for your movie is just not going to be the same as the last one. It's going to be different from everything else. And I think the festival circuit is a great place to try things out. And it's funny because, Napoleon Dynamite was actually recut slightly after it played Sundance. So even after it played, and they added this bonus scene at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I love technology. Or no, that's a deleted scene.
Yeah, but there were tweaks that were made after that. I know Jeremy Kuhn, the producer. I love hearing the inside what could have happened with Napoleon Dynamite. But
we love Raiders too, Jeremy.
Oh, the Raiders, yeah,
so
yeah.
good.
Oh, I'm in that doc. I turn up. I'm
yes, that's okay. He interviews you, right?
Yes, he interviews me. Yes.
Yes. Okay, that's where you're familiar. Okay.
Okay. Yeah. Well. But I do feel like you just have to keep going. You have to kind of be like Gru, right? Like you got to be like Gru and not let whatever the world is trying to tell you. It's like, no, he kind of creates his own world. So I guess for a final question, I want to ask, like, what does Steven Gru think of this movie? He has seen it. And has he seen it with an audience? And you mentioned previously that there are scenes that he cringes, but what does he overall think of the film?
We should probably both answer this, I think. Maybe both of our opinions.
Let's both answer it.
Okay, let's do it. I think, so Steve has been to a lot of screenings with us. He went to Sheffield, England for the world premiere. He went to then Doc NYC with us like a few weeks ago, went to Australia with us. And he doesn't like being called a narcissist. So he makes it a point to like say, if anyone really knows me, they know I'm not a narcissist. The audience obviously gets to decide that for themselves from seeing the film. So I think, that rubs him the wrong way. I think
there's we just were at Cuff Docs in Calgary over the past weekend, and the Calgary Herald had an article where they interviewed Scott and Steven, and Steven has a quote, about us changing the title from The Magic of Gru to The Insufferable Gru, and how he didn't like the title. And his quote is, how could someone that's insufferable make 200 films? and of course that's the whole point, right? Right. So, he doesn't like the title. And I think, the thing we talk about a lot too is, it's really hard to have a film like this made about you, of course, a lot of documentaries are made about people that are, celebrating them, or, they're doing something heroic, and which is, I think, definitely the case to some degree in this film, but also shows hard things and shows, the difficult sides of Steve's personality, and that's hard to have it exposed. So, we definitely, he does have issues with the doc, but, a lot of times when we say things, we know that, thousands of people aren't going to be, watching it and commenting on, everything that you say and do.
And one time an executive he told me, some executive in the audience said the film would do way better if all of the negative stuff was taken out.
That sounds like something he made up. It sounds like something he made up in an effort to, well, you know what? Why don't you just hand him the footage and have him make the Steven Gru cut of The Insufferable Gru? I would love to see the documentary he makes. I think it would be a lot like that acting class, right? Like it would be a lot of that. I mean, as an experiment, that would kind of be fun to see how that would turn out.
Our producer Eric wanted to do the same thing, and then I thought, if he has access to that footage, there might be it might be too difficult for him to hear more stuff. I think that we really were charitable and kind to Steve, and the way we tried to represent him. We love him, and at the same time, you have to be honest with who he really is too.
I can only imagine it's kind of like, having a movie made about you, right? Is kind of cool. I imagine it's almost like having sex for the first time. And it's amazing. You're having sex, but your mom is watching. So it's also awful. So I kind of feel like, that is probably something of what that's like. So congratulations on the film. Director Scott Christopherson, thank you. And Jared Harris, producer, thank you so much. Where can people get more information about the film? Website, throw in some plugs so people listening to the podcast can do their homework.
So probably the biggest thing that we're pushing right now is to pre-order the film on iTunes. It's being released on, video on demand on Amazon, Google, and iTunes December 14th. But it's actually a huge help to us if it gets pre-ordered. So, if you want to see the film, go pre-order on iTunes. That helps it, move up the ranks and visibility.
I got to ask, does it come with extras? Because I love the digital extras. Okay,
yeah,
good.
Yes, it does.
Because now, a lot of these, because I buy movies digital, and I love when they come with commentary and extras and deleted scenes. Okay, so you have one purchaser here.
Yes.
Right now.
We crammed it with extras as much as we possibly could. Yeah.
And they're on iTunes, or they're on all the platforms.
They should be, as far as I know,
right.
They should be on all the platforms.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, I think they're on all the platforms.
Great. And then is there a website, a social media, or what?
Yeah.
Where can we find out?
theinsufferablegrew.com, Instagram or also The Insufferable Groo.
Yeah, probably Instagram is where we'll post the most information.
Yeah. I have faith in our listeners. They use Google. I have been told that a high percentage of listeners of the Film Threat podcast use Google. Look up The Insufferable Groo. It's out in December on VOD. And you need to see it. You need to see if you're an indie film fan and you love movies about the process. And I could name off some of my favorites. American Movie being a favorite with Mark Borchardt. This is very different from that. This is different. I guess you could say it's the same realm, but you need to see The Insufferable Groo. It's not just highly entertaining. It'll inspire you. I really think was that your intention? To sort of somehow get his passion and inspiration. I mean, I'm looking at myself. I mean, I've made a few films, but I have not done what Steven Gru has done. I mean, it's powerful.
Yeah, I've been in the film business for 15 years and have made a few features. And I'm a film professor, but I'm not as passionate as Steve is about filmmaking. It's like in his DNA, it's like his religion almost, right? Like he can't put it away. Even when he said he this summer he said, I'm going to retire after some negative feedback came out about him from the documentary. And we're like, okay. And then the next week he made like 2 more films, right? So I'm super inspired by
love him. I love him.
Yeah, I did not know how inspiring this would be when we got into it. I thought it would be fun and interesting, but I feel the same way that it's just nice. It's nice to see someone with this level of passion, and I think it's really relevant for artists. I also want to plug, lastly, not only our website and things like that, but also look up Steve's stuff. Utah Wolf Productions on YouTube. And, or just Google it and, you can find all of his stuff that way. Great.
Thank you so much. This podcast was not insufferable. It was quite an enjoyable interview. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Did you know that a whip crack is the tip of the whip breaking the speed of sound, and it makes a little sonic boom? Or so I've been told in science class. Whip crack.
Is there like a movie that you've like always wanted to make that you haven't been able to?
There you go. Unexpected race.
My name is Lythorian, and my people were elves.
It's a drama between a mother, a father, a daughter, and then an elf.
I didn't know anything about Stephen Gru when I found the casting call.
Put more of that drawl onto everything so I can hear the Cockney.
To date, I've done 166 movies in 17 years.
I've known 3 people. You're not one of them.
We wanted the dream, and no, it's kind of rejection after rejection.
His film style is much like guerrilla warfare.
Within the last 3 days, I've written 66 pages. I read it to my mom last night. She felt it was pretty solid.
As far as money, he's made nothing on his films, if not lost money.
You like?
I've introduced Steve's work to just about every actor that I've worked with, and Jack Black immediately became a fan.
The rougher the better when it comes to Gru.
What do you think?
Fabulous.
Well, and it looks natural, so.
He just made everything sound like he's this amazing director.
And you just got a phone call that your dad just died.
Oh.
This is a church girls camp. I have to know exactly if it's something within church standards and everything.
It is. This is just a relationship between a human actually falling in love with an elf.
You got to understand that you're on my time, I'm not on yours.
He exudes narcissism with every interaction I've ever had with him.
Never tell the director to hurry.
That's when someone gets fired and I play the rest of their part. Please hurry.
The 3 major questions are going to be who's coming aboard, who's directing it, and where's it going. If one of those is out of sync, no investor is going to come on. People looking in saying, well, it's been 12 years and you can't get a job, but you're not providing for your family. Maybe this is not the time to do the movie.
Steve, it's Jack Black.
There was a little voice in my head going, you don't really know the real Steve Gru.
I mean, I don't want to be the, oh my gosh, but this dream is coming true. It'd be awesome that we get this movie into the Oscars.
This man is so odd.
For 17 years, I've waited for a movie to end up on silver screen. If we're going to do this, I want to have the world see it.
The magic of Gru is uncontained. There is no limit. That's what makes him magnificent.